Welcome, guys, to episode 3 of the Story of Atonement. And in this episode, I'm going to cover continuing on with the aftermath of my father's passing from May of 2018, going up to Missionary 50. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, I talked about how my dad took his own life and how ultimately that was the nail in the coffin for me even attending Missionary 41, on top of some other stuff that happened behind the scenes. So, episode 3 is titled Adulthood because this is the transition period for the childhood Scorpion from the end of childhood going over to the adulthood side of Scorpion, where, he graduated from high school and he's in college and all that. Since then, I've actually graduated from college. It took me a little bit longer than I wanted to because of COVID and gap years and all that, but I ended up, which is cool, I ended up getting my bachelor's degree finally. So I'm very happy about that. So I mentioned at the end of the episode that I would discuss my feelings about Daniel and what exactly happened from my point of view. So this is where we start the video. So Missionary 41, I did plan on attending before, my dad's passed. But then after that, obviously that was a nail in the coffin because I was mentally out. So less than 48 hours later, there was a video that was released by Steven on the YouTube channel. And it was a video of the Sons of Vengeance talking about dead people. So they come out with an urn and they start off the promo of rest and fart. And then after that, they start naming people that are dead. Mind you, my dad's name was mentioned first by Daniel. And that irritated the hell out of me. That honestly was uncalled for. And on top of that, they mentioned other people as well, like Brooks' mom, George's dad, some students that passed away in our school district from, car accidents or, cancer. They would bring up all these names as like a eulogy to make fun of all these dead people with the Sons of Vengeance. I thought the video took way too far. It was way too far. It was completely uncalled for, especially bad timing of it for what I've been going through. And another video that I hold Daniel accountable for would have been the video of Trashville constantly bringing up my dad's name. And I was not happy about that either. I said something to my family or whatnot. I went off on social media and I'm like, if you're, a true friend, you would be there to support. And obviously that got to Steven and all that. He eventually took it down. I had a grudge because of Daniel, because of him not being there for whenever my dad passed away. And I hold a lot of people responsible as well for all that kind of stuff. Nathan, in the video, I think he was in the video, he's responsible for all that, but he never said anything towards me and all that, so I did not have an issue with Nathan, even though him being involved in that video was completely fucked up. 2, Chris. He was also involved in this video. He didn't bring up my dad's name, but Daniel did. And I gave that a pass because while I thought Chris fucked up at the time, Chris actually at least went to the viewing. And that was something that I really appreciated. Not many people in PGW went to my viewing, besides like George, Steven, Chris, Steven's family. It's nothing that doesn't bother me now just because I don't remember the majority of people who were even at my dad's viewing or funeral. So I can't hold a grudge for anybody who didn't show. No, for anybody on the roster. But at the time, Chris, who went to the viewing despite having grievances towards me back around Missionary 40, that said a lot. Daniel, on the other hand, from my knowledge, never got a hold of me, or he might have got a hold of me about whenever all that stuff happened, but Daniel did not take any accountability. He did not take any responsibility back then to, check up on me and obviously acknowledge that what he was doing on camera was completely wrong. And I held Steven accountable for that too. And Steven even said in a video a few years ago that what he did to post those videos public, because lo and behold, that's not even a word. Overall, the main person for something to go on camera is Steven. Once it's published by Steven, it's out on the internet. So I held Steven accountable for that, and he knew he fucked up. He apologized to me about it. He apologized on camera about it. And ultimately, those videos ended up being edited. And that's why some of those videos were abruptly edited, because my dad's name on camera. That was something I didn't appreciate back then. I believe Daniel saw that as a joke back then. Unfortunately, I took it personal. And that basically told me all I needed to know about Daniel. Same with Chris. Even though Chris kind of made up for it to some degree. Daniel never did that. Daniel never took responsibility for that. He just went along with his life and all that stuff. And I'm sure he's watching it now, with a different, perspective. But this was my thinking back in the day. So those two videos were out. And I still believe that there are still other videos out there that were, other people name dropping my dad's name and all that throughout season 3. That's one of the reasons why I refused to go back and watch season 3, to risk me hearing his name being mentioned on camera. There have only been a few matches like Jackson Brooks and Chris Reckless that I've watched, for example. So there's that. So overall, the way that Daniel handled, or the way that Daniel used that to his advantage on camera, to me, I absolutely lost all my respect for Daniel for that. And that was something that he couldn't come back from. Even if he apologized, or if he sees this video and apologizes to me for all this, I still wouldn't accept his apology, because that was something that he shouldn't have done to me during the time of need when I needed, the people in my life the most. So, unfortunately, it was something that should have been avoided. And the other thing that Steven and I talked about, because Steven and I actually hung out this weekend, a lot of this stuff, and not just with my dad, there should have never been any mentions of dead people on camera. Ever. Again, we were immature and all this stuff back then. And I do hold some responsibility for some stuff that I brought up as well, and some things. Like the George stuff, but that was her storyline, and he gave me permission to do that. But when you talk about these dead people on camera, whether it's on and off camera especially, which is like stabbing a person in the back, that stuff should never be mentioned on camera. That's like a rule of thumb. You don't mess with people's emotions on camera. And it's a shame that we all did this back in the day. It's uncalled for. It's irresponsible. It's immature. Like how Noah's grandmother was brought up multiple times on camera. David's family was brought up multiple times on camera. Brooke's mom was brought up multiple times on camera. Everything from bringing up dead people in those videos, it was completely fucked up. Never should have happened, looking back at it. And I'm not saying that because of my dad, but that was just really immature of all of us to do that back in the day. So there's that. So unfortunately, my family also gets wind of this. George almost gets stuck in the middle of all of this. But overall, like George wanted to get his hands on Daniel too, because George took it personally too. And again, George never liked Daniel. I want to point that out. George never liked Daniel in the first place, even from his debut. So all that was done. So overall, the reason why Daniel and I are not friends anymore is how he basically used my dad to get himself over on camera, on top of not taking responsibility for those videos, and kind of the way he handled everything with my dad's death and all that stuff. It sucks. I love Daniel to death. I was one of the guys that pushed for him to be the guy in CWA. Only two of us pushed for that. That would have been Steven and I still feel that way. I still don't regret pushing for Daniel to get that spot. But overall, unfortunately, that's what happened. So there was just no coming back from all that. And I hate when my freaking computer does this. Let's go back. Give me 1 second. My computer's so old, it ain't funny. So, ultimately, this ultimately leads to Missionary 41. And ultimately, Daniel does it again, which basically tells me that, like, he sees this whole thing as a joke. And Chris did the same thing. At the end of the match, Daniel wins the world title, and ultimately, all they keep saying is rich, 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 rich. Him and Chris. I thought that was completely unacceptable. And even to my, like, I don't know how Steven took it. I know I got bitchy with him about it, but it was completely uncalled for. Like I said, I thought Daniel took this whole situation as a complete joke, and it really bothered me. And to this day, Steven and I completely disagree on this. This is one of the biggest things that we disagree on, and I completely understand his perspective. But Daniel winning the world title at Missionary 41, in my opinion, is the worst booking decision in PGW history. And that's self-biased towards me. And I'm sticking to my guns on this. And in my opinion, I think Daniel used leverage with the HWL guys to get himself over in PGW. And I'm talking about the 41 run going up to 43. I think Daniel used the HWL guys to get himself even more over to be the champion, whether it was with Chris or with Nathan. I think he used that as leverage towards Steven also. But at the same time, there wasn't any options. And I could see Steven's perspective towards that, where Steven gave Daniel the title because there wasn't many options for who to win. And I think one of the worst things that they did was use the Hellspawn Deathmatch as the main event. Because it's like, there wasn't a story there. And I thought back in the day, I thought that was just Daniel winning the world title as a jab for how the HWL guys were treated back in Missionary 40 by most of the wrestlers there, like me, Ed, George, stuff like that. So that's how I took it. Like, I took Daniel's world title win personally, and I was very upset by it. I was offended. I'm like, you're really going to give him the belt for the issues he was causing on camera? But that's what happened back in the day, and it made me absolutely sick to my stomach, and it still kind of bothers me that it happened, but it is what it is. So Daniel ultimately wins the world title, and basically I also said to myself, and I still feel this way, like how I said CWA, Daniel had his chance back in Missionary 21, and he left. So, like, why would he be given another chance after we spent all this time on him just to leave in CWA and give him this run that, So, like, it did not make sense to me back in the day. And I know Steven's going to see this and, disagree with my whole assessment when it comes to that. But I was very ticked off with the whole Sons of Vengeance back then. Again, when I say dead people should not be mentioned on camera ever, looking back at it, it never should have happened. And it's unfortunate that it was the case. So I'm going to leave this topic right now just because the more I talk about it, the more pissed off I get even thinking about it. So I'm just going to move on to the next subject. And the subject is where I'm at with Daniel now. And how do I feel about Daniel Block? I still don't like Daniel. Though we're not friends, we're mutual. And I'm fine with that. I don't have to be friends with someone and be mutual with them. And personally, I still think, I think Daniel's grown up a bit. And I think Daniel, if he sees us, I'm not going to shit on him. I think Daniel's grown up. Though, again, we've all made mistakes back in the day. Because, again, we were, teenagers and we were kids. So back then, it was completely different. And there's no way I can compare Daniel to other people that I think that have done me wrong, especially Emma. I think Emma's a piece of shit. So that I will bring up in a future episode about Medusa's departure and all that. But, like, he's no Emma. Like, she is beyond worse. I can't wait to talk about that. But no, Daniel, I think, has matured and grown up a bit. And I think he looks back at it and kind of regrets all that stuff that happened. And I can completely understand that. Again, I'm not going to ever accept an apology from him, but I completely understand. But overall, are Daniel and I friends? No. But are we mutual? Yes. And I could have conversations with Daniel, and I can actually be professional with Daniel. I can do all that. But as friends, we're not friends. We're just mutual. So that's how I look at it. But I absolutely respect Daniel as a wrestler in terms of his wrestling ability and all that stuff, despite the circumstances for Missionary 41. So that's how I feel about Daniel. So we talked about me returning, and I felt like it was the right time to return, and that would have been Missionary 45's Royal Rumble. It's the best Royal Rumble of all time, hands down. And the original idea was for me and Steven to be the number 1 and 2 entries. But unfortunately, Steven blades himself. And basically, we tell him that you're not wrestling the Royal Rumble, even though he wanted to wrestle me and wrestle the match. So I pitched this idea with Daniel. Well, not with Daniel, but about Daniel. I said to Steven, what if Daniel was the first entry and I was the number 2 entry? And again, I still despised Daniel at the time, but I would put business over personal feelings. And that's exactly what I did. So Daniel and I started out at number 1 and 2. And unfortunately, I almost left before the match even started, because as I got to the house, supposedly Noah told me Daniel was talking about my dad. But overall, I still, was I happy about that still? No. But I did business over personal feelings. And Daniel and I still meshed very well. It's just that we never got that one last match with each other. So I get a decent performance. I eliminate El Tres Luchador, get to wrestle Daniel one more time, and the last time, believe it or not, ever. I get to wrestle Shane, rising up. I get to wrestle, I thought I was going to wrestle Nathan, but he did the brother thing. So there's that. I get to wrestle Chris. I get to wrestle Anthony for the first time, and that's one of the reasons why I actually came back to PGW. So we plant the seeds for me and Anthony or whatnot, and Anthony wanted to wrestle me. I don't know why. He just did. So I saw him with a lot of potential, and we do the match, or we decide we're going to do the match, but how do we get there? So we pitch this idea or whatnot to do a tag team match at Final Judgment 2 between me and RJ against Steven and Anthony, where I ultimately get my revenge on Steven for Missionary 40, but then I end up losing to Anthony in the process. It was a fun and underrated tag team match. I really much enjoyed it, and it still holds up. It was very good. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the Royal Rumble, like I said. Ultimately, the another seed was Anthony obviously eliminating me from the Royal Rumble match. And I liked the way we did that. And my elimination was actually inspired by Kurt Angle's elimination from the Big Show from the Royal Rumble of 2004. So that's where I got that elimination from, because I wanted to start using the ankle lock to, as a tribute to George. Though, I'll be honest, I kind of did it better than George, let's be honest. I start doing Germans, like I want to get a little more technical in the ring. And why I did the ankle lock again, like I said, is because of George, but at the same time, I tried to memorialize him, and ultimately, I tried too hard to keep George the Butcher's legacy alive. It just didn't work. But I still wanted to do the moves just because. So that happens, and then we get to the build-up for me and Anthony. So I'm revealed on the 100th day as his opponent for Resurrection 2, and it went over so badly with the fans. Understandably so, because of, how the run went at Missionary 40. I know this stuff's turned off now because how YouTube changed their policies, but it had upwards to 15 to 20 dislikes to 3 or whatnot. And I know the fans were so pissed, and I actually loved it. Besides, it was go away heat anyways, but I still loved it. Because, you still got that, wound there still from Missionary 40. And each video that came out, it got more dislikes, and I loved it. And could have been spam likes also, or spam dislikes like the whole Missionary 30 stuff. It could have been, but I was actually enjoying it. The only thing was, for this run, the stuff that happened, I did not say, I'm not going to lose until I lose to, this person. I didn't do any of that. Now, before we get to all that, I do want to bring up about my views on this run up until Missionary 47, because this is a huge debate, whether it was a failure or a success. I thought it was a success. Steven didn't like the run. He did originally for a few years, and he didn't like the run. The way I look at it is, the run, for me, in my opinion, it might have been my third best run, but it was nothing but self-fulfilling prophecy. It was basically the light version of the 40 run, where it was minimal losses and, arguable burials and, loses that only were because of storyline purposes, which we get to, obviously we do the 6-man tag last second. We do that with Shane, Steven, and Anthony. So we do that match, and then we get to, the Resurrection 2 match. I'm not... Sorry, it's just some personal stuff going on. But where did I start? I don't even remember where I last began, but anyways, the way I look at me and Anthony's match was, it was arguably a burial with the build-up and all that, and Anthony was somewhat to a degree on the road to Resurrection buried, and I could see why, but I didn't have any control compared to 40 when it came to these situations. It was all on Steven, and Anthony did nothing wrong. Steven just wanted him to not take... He wanted to notch him down a little bit. But we do the match with me and Anthony for the U.S. title, and ultimately I lose. And I kind of don't want to wrestle anymore because I feel like I missed a step, especially with the botched finish. We planned this ending sequence where I wanted to do like a backdrop, and he just drops down, and I just kind of, despite that, I'm not, I didn't like the match at first for a good couple years, but I'm a little more fonder of it now, just because of where it led me. So, I don't have an issue with the match. It's just that it wasn't the way I was hoping. There were some good spots, though, like the Dragon Suplex and the German off the picnic table. That did hurt, though, but, we actually planned some few things, and it worked. I just wish we were a little more technical. I think the match would have been better, but it is what it is, basically. So, there's that. So, Steven wants me to do a few more matches under my belt, and the person he pitches to me next is Shane. So, I do the match with Shane, or Zero Assault, and honestly, out of this whole run, I think Shane is the only person that benefited from this run because it was a massive put-over. It was the first time, I believe, that I've tapped out on camera in years. So that was a big, put-over for Shane. And some people thought I could have won the world title, even though when it comes to predictability, everybody knew I wasn't going to win the world title. So we do the match. It was great. The brief build was awesome. And then we go to this story where if I lose one more match, what's the point of me being here? So this is the part where Steven wants to do some dream matches and kind of get some, wins under my belt. Despite me not earning it, the way I want some of these matches could have been by, BS or, people who couldn't, afford a loss. So the way I would win some of these matches protected some of these guys. So the first match was obviously with Jay Payne, okay match. And then we do the match with Lunatic, okay match. Probably want to know his best matches. And then we start doing the build for me and Steven, because Steven wanted to do another match with me, so we build out for Missionary 46. And then I do a handicap match, obviously, which is probably one of the weaker matches. Then we get to 46's match. I was in a rush because personal family stuff that happened or were mentioned or whatnot. So I had to get back to help them with the moving because we were going to put our house up for sale at the time. So I came there in a bad mood, wanted to get my match out of the way, which luckily Steven was able to do that for me. And then I was on my way out. So it took another year, obviously, before we ended up moving, but that's what happened. And honestly, this match with Steven is underrated. And the way to protect Steven from this was his finger was on the ropes, which I liked. It ultimately led to his heel turn, which, again, storytelling back in the day wasn't super great, but you get a few odds and ends when it comes to the storytelling, and you just like how storytelling works these days. So that was good. That F5 was brutal. Obviously, it was good to wrestle Steve for the first time as Missionary 30, and I actually enjoyed it. I couldn't thank him enough for that because it's probably one of my more underrated matches with him. So that was fun. And I think a lot of people did have a little bit of fun with that too. And then afterwards, we do the confrontation with Greg to build that up. And then we get to a match with Billy. Oh boy. So, everybody knows, my feelings when it comes to Billy, chaotic or whatnot. This match was designed just to do the match, whether or not there was a winner or a loser in it. And Steven wanted to do this match regardless. And a lot of fans were excited for this match. They were not expecting it. And I knew after the match was done that there was so much more that we can do. And I'm so glad we got 3 more matches in terms of singles belts because they were so much better than our matches back in CWA. I don't know what happened. I think the both of us just evolved with our wrestling abilities. And it was just, it was perfect. So ultimately, I beat Billy, but by count out because of RJ. So that helps Billy from not having to take a pinfall loss. So again, that was fun. And then ultimately, I do a match with Christian or Big Rig, which was like a CWA callback. And it was nothing more than just a CWA match where obviously Christian could take a loss, something like that. And then we do finally the dream match with me and Maniac, which ultimately Steven wanted me to win clean. And that was also underrated. And again, didn't hurt Greg by any means because ultimately, Greg was kind of going downhill as a wrestler. So it's not like he took a bad loss in that. And then ultimately, we finally do the match with Chris, where ultimately I end up losing. Chris didn't care for this match. He didn't want to wrestle me. But ultimately, we do the match, and the match itself, a bit botchy on my end. It was my first weapons match, this Missionary 20. And ultimately, Chris destroys my ass. He taps me out and pins me. And then ultimately after that, Chippy attacks me post-match. Obelisk. So, good way to end the run, despite it being self-fulfilling prophecy with minimal losses. It still was somewhat of a success, even if nobody was really a fan of it. It gave me confidence back as a wrestler on the road to 50. And there's not much more than I can say about it because it was more or less this starting point of me trying to, obviously fix some mistakes from 40. And I think it was the start of it. We always say I atone for my sins, but I don't think I necessarily atone for my sins. I more or less look at this run as the start of fixing everything that happened. You obviously can't go back and change these mistakes and all that happened, but you can go back and improve as a wrestler and make your, presence feel known and, improve in the ring and get your confidence back and all this stuff. That's what happened with this run. Again, it was a roller coaster ride, and I couldn't be more than happy with how everything turned out, despite it being self-fulfillment for, me again. So there's that. And there was a few dream matches that were supposed to happen but never did. I know I called out Daniel in the one match after Billy because there was an idea planned to do me and Daniel around Missionary 46 or as a side match before 47. But the issue was I refused to lose to Daniel at the time, and I think there were some political reasonings as to why Daniel would not wrestle ever again in PGW. So it just didn't work. And as far as the match with Genesis was concerned, we both just didn't have any interest in wrestling each other. I didn't really want to wrestle Bailey. Bailey didn't want to really wrestle me. Bailey at the time also, Steven did not like. I don't know if her personal or wrestling related, but he just ultimately he did one more match against Chris, which ultimately I basically pedigree him into retirement, and Bailey's I don't think ever seen on camera again. So we do the little moment there because we knew the match wasn't going to happen, but we can at least get that moment of that stare down and a pedigree or whatnot. And speaking of which, I don't know because Bailey did the tag team match at 51. So no, I think that was his last appearance until Missionary 51 in terms of wrestling or whatnot. So I'm off camera for a while and I completely changed my look again. So I end up returning for Final Judgment against Leatherface. A match that I didn't really want to do, but Steven wanted to do it. And I was actually excited to do this match anyways. So another underrated match of mine or whatnot. And then we get to the match with, or the tag team with Chippy. So Steven pitches me this idea of what if you tag team with Chippy. For those who don't know, Chippy or Obelisk, he was a newer wrestler that came in back around Missionary 46, and he is Chris's younger brother. He's fat. So he wanted me to use him as like a mentor role or whatnot, despite the attack of Missionary 47. And I hated this idea so much. I really did. I didn't see the point of doing it, but it worked a little bit. I can't complain about that. So Steven brought up to me about winning the tag team titles. And again, after the whole Intercontinental title thing and winning the tag titles finally at 40, at this point, I wasn't in it for me because I didn't want to win any titles. Because I had that moment back in season 2 or whatnot. So I didn't see the point of winning War Gold. But he ultimately persuaded me to win the tag team titles with Chippy. So he did that. Went on a little run, had a defense in there as well. And I also got into a feud with Ed. And I basically attacked Ed when he was going to retire or whatnot, which is ironic, to set up me and Ed for the first time ever in a one-on-one match. On top of that, I do feud with Billy as well, because in my eyes, I pitched this idea because I wanted to wrestle Billy again, and I thought it was cool to use him as a way to get to me and Ed. So we have our second, classic before Missionary 50. And my God, it's probably the most underrated match of my career. We fucking blew or tore the house down with that match. So many six spots or whatnot. I get gassed or whatnot briefly because I overexerted myself, which was a very negative thing about a lot of my career, where I would overexert myself in moments where I would gas myself out despite being in good shape and all that stuff, which I actually got in very good shape for the summer run back in 2019. So there's that. And then we get to Missionary 50. And ultimately, I'm only supposed to have 2 matches. So me and Ed wrestle for the first time ever. And that's the first match we do. And originally, I think this would have been my last match. And we would have done the tag team title thing beforehand. But we'll get to the third match after I talk about the other 2 matches. So basically, the only reason why me and Ed happened was Steven wanted to award Ed with a win over me as like a thank you or whatnot. And I actually was looking forward to wrestling Ed. And overall, the match wasn't that great, but we did pick up the notch within the last 5 minutes of the match. And I think it saved the match personally, though it might have been the least best match of the show. I thought we did good for what it could have been. Like I mentioned, like some good moments and all that stuff, and those last 5 minutes are actually pretty wild. So ultimately, Ed beats me clean as a whistle, and then we get to the tag team match where ultimately I tap out to Billy, and I was completely fine with doing it because I did beat Billy, so I wasn't being a baby about losing to Billy, and I tap out to Billy and drop the tag team titles with Chippy and awarded them to Billy and Ed. So they were the final tag team champions. And then we get to the third match. That was not supposed to happen. So, as you guys saw, there was a build-up for the Intercontinental title match in Missionary 50. And Joe Mysterion was supposed to be the guy to wrestle and beat Billy at 50. But Joe was stinking with the build when it came to how his acting was on screen or his wrestling. And they flipped the script, and Billy wanted to lose to me again. I don't know why. That's something you would have to ask him. And Steven said, "You're going to beat Billy for the Intercontinental title." I'm like, why? I don't deserve it. After everything that I've done back at 40 now and that stuff. But he's like, "Josh, there's a difference between the two of them. You didn't earn it the first time. But from what you've done back since 45, you've earned it. From how you've been performing, how you've been on camera. You've been wrestling for a good while now. It's the best thing that I can do for you. You've earned it." And I was still nervous because I think there was still a lot of resentment towards Missionary 40 and all that stuff. So I didn't really want to win or beat Billy clean again. So I pitched the idea of throwing Shane into the match. So doing me versus Shane versus Billy. So I didn't have to pin Billy again. I can just pin Shane. Because Shane was kind of on punishment tour for stuff that I won't discuss. But I didn't want to beat Billy again. But Billy insisted, Steven insisted, and I just said, okay, I'll do it. So ultimately, I beat Billy for the Intercontinental title in another good match. I don't think it was as great as the second one was before 50, but it was still a very good match. And I ended up winning the Intercontinental title, and what surprised me even more compared to 40 was that nobody said a word. Nobody argued, nobody bitched, nobody complained. No one said a word. And that meant to me that nobody had an issue with me winning the Intercontinental title because I earned it. And honestly, me losing to Chris when we say I atoned for my sins, that's not really where I atone for my sins. I feel like I atone for my sins whenever I beat Billy for the Intercontinental title. Because it felt like I basically obviously not fixed my mistakes and all that stuff, but I feel like I earned it this time. I feel like I had to fight for it without having to be given the title. I felt like I was back to being one of the boys again, and it made me so happy because I felt like I was part of the group and all that again. So I was really happy about that. Let's see here. Where are we at now? So yeah, I can't say anything more than enough and thank Steven and Billy for giving me one last chance. Primarily Steven because, Steven didn't give up on me. He knew I cared about this. I cared about wrestling. Steven knew I absolutely cared of doing this and loved professional wrestling. I loved the boys. And I was very happy that I won the belt. Even though I didn't want to be the final champion, and I did not want to lose, or I did not want to win my last match, but it happened. And I can't say anything but good things about that, because I thought that was the ultimate moment for me of finally earning it. You have to earn it. You can't give it to yourself. Respect is earned, not given. That's always the go-to line when it comes to, earning your, earning all the awards, earning your keep, makes me happy. So, which leads to me being done. And then ultimately we get to COVID-19 where, obviously we all shut down in the country, and obviously I not dropped out of college, but took a gap year. So ultimately I was able to do a full-time run for HFW and Endgame because of COVID and the gap year. So ultimately I decide to decline Emma's offer at first to join HFW, but ultimately I gave in around April or so, and I don't know why, but Steven wanted me to win the World's Eyes contract. And that's something that I will discuss in the next episode where I talk about HFW and Endgame, which again, I'm not going to talk about Endgame too much since I did that before in a previous video. But Emma finally got what she wanted, and she finally pushed me back into, wrestling, which we get to Unsainted in the next video. So again, I didn't really speak too much about this whole thing between May 2018 and, 50, because I feel like this was more or less me trying to redeem myself. And despite the first half of the run between Missionary 45 and Missionary 47 being a hit or miss when it came to how it was booked from Steven's perspective, ultimately, I earned everything up to Missionary 50 moving forward because I had to fight for my spot and fight for, I had to earn it this time and not be given it. And it was a nice lesson for me to learn. So there's not much besides that besides, the Rumble, which was fun, the tag, I don't know what else to say besides that. I'm just very appreciative that I was given a second chance, and that's all I have to say on that. So this one was a bit short, but the next episode we'll go into depth about HFW and a little bit of Endgame. So thank you guys for watching.